Okay, let's go ahead and get started. For those that I don't know, my name is May Elliott, and this week we'll be exploring the Buddha's 5 daily recollections, sometimes called the 5 remembrances or 5 reflections. And these are a series of reflections that the Buddha recommended that we actively bring to mind daily. And when I learned that there was a practice that the Buddha actually recommended daily, it really caught my attention. I was like, oh, well, this must be important. Um, However, when I learned what they were, I realized they really weren't easy reflections, but I could see how tremendously beneficial they could be. Um, and when I actually practiced them, that's what I found. So hopefully you'll think so as well. So here are the 5. And we'll start with the first one today. So the first is, I am subject to aging. I have not gone beyond aging. The second, I am subject to illness. I have not gone beyond illness. I am subject to death. I have not gone beyond death. The fourth is, I must be parted and separated from everyone and everything dear and agreeable to me. And the fourth, I am the owner of my deeds and heir to my deeds. Deeds are my womb, my relative, my refuge. I shall be the heir of whatever deeds I do, whether good or bad. So these are the 5. And we'll do one each day. And during the meditation period, we'll actually practice with the remembrances. So today I'll provide a slightly longer pre-meditation intro just to share about how we'll actually practice with them. So we'll begin with just some quiet breath meditation so that your minds can settle a bit, become a little more calm. And then I'll offer 2 ways to practice with the recollection. We'll start with just dropping the phrase into the meditation, kind of like dropping a pebble into a pond without conceptualizing a response, just seeing what naturally ripples through the mind and heart. So that's the first method. And then after that, and maybe I should say that could be complete in and of itself. That can be a complete practice. But just to offer you a variety of ways to practice with these teachings, we'll do a second method. And during the second method, we'll actually do an engaged contemplation. So a word on contemplation. In these sorts of meditations, we're intentionally inviting thinking to occur around a specific theme. But given that the mind can be very discursive and one thought can easily lead to another and another and another, we're going to keep a short leash on the thinking. So that keep that in mind as we do the contemplation, and I'll remind you of that during the meditation. So that might sound like a lot, but we'll keep it very simple, just these 2 different practices. So returning to our phrases, again, today, I am subject to aging. I have not gone beyond aging. And while we all know this, the purpose of this reflection is to help it sink more deeply into the heart, to help us realize it more fully. So let's see what happens during the meditation. So go ahead and find your meditation posture, a position that allows you to be both alert and relaxed. Maybe beginning by taking a few deep breaths. And connecting with your meditation anchor. That might be the breath, maybe listening to the soundscape, maybe a global sense of the body sitting or lying down in whatever posture you're in. And inviting the mind to rest, to settle on your anchor. So we'll have some time in silence now just to land, to connect with the here and now, and to settle. You notice that the mind is wandering. Gently and kindly bring your attention back. You might slide your attention back to the anchor, especially if you're noticing that you're jerking the mind back or tugging the mind back to the present. Just a smooth, non-reactive slide back to the now. Shift now to introduce our contemplation. Just like dropping a pebble in a pond, we'll drop in our reflection, just allowing the words to move through the mind and heart and body and seeing what ripples out. No effort to make anything happen or to squint to look too hard. Here's the phrase, dropping this in. I am subject to aging. I have not gone beyond aging. Just seeing what happens, maybe nothing, maybe something. I am subject to aging. I have not gone beyond aging. Or sometimes translated old age. I am subject to old age. I have not gone beyond old age. Taking a minute or two to play with this on your own, at your own pace. Maybe there's sensations in the body. Maybe certain thoughts come to mind. And if they do, you can include them. You don't need to push them away. You can see what sorts of images or words arise in the mind. It's part of the ripple. And when you're ready, letting go of the phrase and coming back to your anchor. Allowing the mind to collect and settle once again. Introduce our second form of contemplation. It'll include a little more thinking. This is our engaged contemplation. I'll offer the phrase again, and this time with some questions to allow you to think about the phrase, see what comes up for you. And I'll offer several questions, and you don't need to reflect on each one. Just pick up whatever stands out to you. I am subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging. So how deeply do you know this? Do you know it conceptually only, or do you know it in your core? When you visually see that aging is happening, how is it for you? Maybe wrinkling skin, sunspots, graying hair, maybe a change in ability levels. How is that for you? There might be thinking that arises out of these, of course, but don't forget to include the body. So there may be some thoughts and there may be physical sensations, emotions that arise. So we're including it all. When you feel aging in the body, how is that for you? Maybe less strength, less functionality. I had mentioned less ability. Maybe memories come to mind, a tenderness in the heart. Just holding all of this with gentleness and kindness. When you consider old age, is there fear? If so, what are you afraid of? What are you looking forward to? What are you looking forward to as you age? Some of you, of course, may identify already being in deep old age. We're all getting older, if we're lucky. So as you get even older, is there anything you're afraid of or looking forward to? Imagine yourself in your ideal old age. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Reflecting on this, what does it feel like in the body? Your ideal old age. Coming back to the breath, the body, letting go of the inquiry, settling back into silence. If there's any tenderness in the heart, whatever may be reverberating from the contemplations, include those, including those in these moments of silence together, making space for them, holding them with kindness and compassion, gentleness. knowing that all beings are subject to aging. May all beings be joyful and happy. May all beings be strong and healthy. May they be safe and protected. And may they live peaceful and at ease. Thank you for your meditation. Welcome back. So for those who are just arriving, welcome to you. My name is May Elliott, and I'd like to start with a poem by K. Ryan. It's called The Niagara River. As though the river were a floor, we position our table and chairs upon it, eat and have conversation. As it moves along, we notice, as calmly as though dining room paintings were being replaced, the changing scenes along the shore. We do know this is the Niagara River, but it is hard to remember what that means. So here we are, all floating down the Niagara River. We're all on this boat, calmly rearranging the furniture, watching the passing scenery, and as Kay Ryan put it, we do know that we're all on the Niagara River, but it's hard to remember what that means. So it's hard for us to remember that as we live our lives, we're all making our way to Niagara Falls. We all have an expiration date, in other words. We just don't know what it is yet. So it's not news to any of you that there's aging, sickness, and death. And yet we don't often live with this understanding. So the Buddha provided us with a teaching so we could remember. We could remember what's hard to remember. And what he offered us are these 5 phrases, the 5 daily recollections for daily reflection. And for those just tuning in, I'll share them again. I am subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging. I am subject to illness, have not gone beyond illness. I am subject to death, have not gone beyond death. I must be parted and separated from everyone and everything dear and agreeable to me. And lastly, I am the owner of my deeds, which is sometimes translated as actions. I'm the owner of my deeds and heir to my deeds. Deeds are my womb, my relative, and my refuge. I shall be the heir of whatever deeds I do, whether good or bad. So these are the 5, and clearly they're not easy. They're not easy reflections. So we'll be talking about that over the next couple of days. And these come from the Anguttara Nikaya, 557, the Upajjhatthana Sutta. And they appear elsewhere in the suttas as well. So this first phrase today, I am subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging. So we're all growing older, and yet we forget or actively deny aging. And this is common, trying to look young forever with products and surgery and all number of things. I had an elderly aunt who was very into making herself look young, and she went to great lengths and great expense to do so. And she wasn't married, and she was dating well into her 80s. And so here she is, she's in her 80s. And when she'd go on a date and a man would ask her how old she was, she would say, I'm closer to 60 than 50. But she'd say this when she was in her 80s. And technically it was true. She was closer to 60 than 50, but it was also a little misleading. So people do all sorts of crazy things to keep aging away. And it makes sense because Western culture rejects aging. That further amplifies our tendency to forget. But something I find intriguing is that this tendency isn't just a present moment phenomenon. 2,600 years ago, during the time of the Buddha, people were also forgetting that aging, sickness, and death are coming. That I am of the nature to grow old, to get sick, to die. So the Buddha must have realized that for most people, these truths had not fully penetrated the psyche, that the conceptual mind knows this, but the heart doesn't. So these phrases, they function to move these truths from the head to the heart. So through daily reflection, we can learn to live more in harmony with aging, not go to war with aging, with these different experiences of life. So in a lot of ways, we might say this is an acceptance practice. We're coming to terms with the way things are. Because so much of our suffering actually comes from being in contention with the way things are, with the way things have come to be. And part of learning to accept the truth of aging, sickness, death, loss, it's a shift in our expectations, such that we're no longer surprised when they come for us. So that's part of the way this functions, the shift in expectations. The former abbess at Green Gulch, Fu Schrader, used to say, when firemen get to a fire, they don't scream, "Oh my God, it's a fire!" No, they've expected that's where they're going. Of course, there's a fire there, no surprise. So one way we suffer with aging, sickness, and death is that somehow we're surprised by it. It's like, oh no, what's happening? Something has gone terribly wrong. Frank Ostaseski, the co-founder of Zen Hospice, he tells a story about a very elderly woman on her deathbed. And I don't recall exactly. She could have been in her late 90s, 100, something like that. And from her deathbed, she whispered, "Why me? Why me?" So how can we shift our expectations such that we don't take aging and death as a personal affront? On the contrary, when we age, it's actually things are going right. This is actually how it's supposed to happen and will happen and has been happening since humans existed. So one way these recollections function is in remembering them daily is we become much less surprised and with it, less fearful. So Charlotte Bronte quote, "To see and know the worst is to take from fear her main advantage." To see and know the worst is to take from fear her main advantage. So when we've come to terms with the worst case scenario, I am going to get old, I am going to get sick, I am going to die, I'm going to lose everything I love. When we've come to terms with this, fear has lost its power over us in a lot of ways. And with it, of course, aversion has a whole lot less power over us because this practice invites acceptance. So at one point, I was exploring this practice more rigorously, and I discovered an app, a phone app called Aging Booth. And so you put a photo in, you press a button, and it will age you by about 40 years or so. So depending on how old you are, some of you are already in your elderly years and may not feel like you need any help visualizing what you'll look like in old age. But for those who don't look so old yet, this can be a striking experience to face the reality of what's to come. And remember, there's only one thing that can prevent aging, and that's death. So with this in mind, maybe we should be delighted to age. And of course, that's not the typical response. So by realizing these truths, aging, sickness, death, loss. One of the effects is that we actually can learn to live differently. So, how does remembering these things affect what you prioritize? How does it affect what you allow yourself to become entangled in or get upset over? Does it bring perspective? How would you spend your time if you really knew that death could happen at any moment, that you won't have your faculties forever? How does it impact your relationships, your willingness to forgive? So this is one of the fruits of this practice, is that it changes our priorities and it changes how we engage in the present moment. So another function of this practice, each of these phrases has a different function. So the Buddha named a different function for each phrase. So I am of the nature to age has the function of, quote, overcoming the conceit of youth. Overcoming the conceit of youth. So in other words, the sense of immortality, the sense that this energy, this vitality will be here forever. And instead, realizing that vitality is a temporary resource, can we appreciate any vitality that we currently have, any vitality that remains? So as I mentioned earlier, as we do this practice, it can be difficult. And I'm not sure these phrases can be treated lightly. On the contrary, and especially as they progress, they seem to get a little harder. One through the first through the fourth tend to get a little harder and a little harder as they go for people. Not for everyone, but with this in mind, please be gentle with yourself when engaging in this practice. I am of the nature to age, may not push any buttons for you, but some of the next ones might. So so please be gentle with yourselves. Titrate this practice little by little in small ways. We really don't want to weaponize these phrases and use them in a way that takes us out of our bandwidth of tolerance, or that provokes grief in any way that overwhelms our capacity to be mindful. And if difficult emotions do arise, you can just practice by recognizing them, allowing them, and remembering that these feelings are the same that move through all human hearts. This is the natural purification process that humans experience when they come to terms with these truths. Not my grief, but the great grief that belongs to no one and visits us all. So if it's supportive as you do these practices, you might close with some metta or self-compassion practice, and something to soothe the heart if it's become agitated. So let's close together in that way. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be safe. And may all beings be at ease. Thank you so much for your kind attention today. It's so nice to be back with you. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Take care, everyone.